Can you talk, Justin, about the impact of the widespread furloughing of the government and how that is taking a toll on the economy?
Yeah. So there's two ways we talk about the economy. One is the statistics you hear about, GDP and employment and things like that. The shutdown's actually relatively small in terms of its effect on things like GDP. Basically, most of the work is getting done. Most of the workers will eventually get paid. Some of the money will move from one quarter to another quarter. It's not that big of a deal. There's a different way we talk about economics, which is about people and about values. What's happening right now is we, the voters, are paying through our taxes for the government. That money's going to go and get paid to government workers either way by the end. That's what the law requires. But we're not letting them work. So what's really happening is just a tragic waste of money, of resources, and of the passion of public employees who want to serve us all. It's both sides of politics burning our tax dollars as a way of showing how much they disrespect each other as part of their fight. It's an incredibly inefficient way to get there. And then the even more human part of this is, think about the families that are on SNAP, that are on food stamps. They rely on this for literally putting food on the table. About 3/4 of those families now are saying they're genuinely stressed. Nearly half are saying that they're going to be skipping meals. You may not like the government one way or the other, but your heart has to go out to those families and the kids in those families who've done nothing wrong, who thought they had a safety net to rely on, and that safety net has been wrenched away from them.
You know, there's a lot that we are not seeing in this moment around how the government is moving and operating. We're not seeing Congresspeople talk to each other. We're also not seeing the real impact that this is having on American families, and you just spoke to that a moment ago. But one of the most important things we're also not seeing are economic numbers. We're not seeing job numbers. We're not seeing numbers around GDP and what that looks like. And we are not seeing any of the key economic data that we use to evaluate our economic outlook. When we are in this space, you're the economist. Help us understand, for those of us who are watching things and we're looking at what was last reported as a pretty impressive, almost 3.4 increase in GDP, but then also very alarming increase in unemployment, particularly among certain communities. How in this moment are you looking at the economic forecast when we aren't getting the actual numbers?
Yeah, so think about the moment that we're in, Charles. It's a really extraordinary moment. The president has basically taken our economy and turned the table upside down. Some might argue it's good. Some might argue it's bad. The way we resolve those debates is by looking at numbers, looking at data. So the Fed has got to try and steer our economy through the fog. There's extra fog because there's so much change. Remember, tariffs are on one day, they're off the next. Fiscal policy's changing day to day. The president's changing his mind on just about every issue on any day that happens to end in a Y. So already the job is hard. We're steering through fog at a critical moment. It could be that the economy's on the cusp of recession. It literally could be the economy's on the cusp of an AI-driven boom. And then what we've done is we've put the blindfolds on. We've said no more data for you. I don't think it's going to stop the Fed from its next rate cut, which is coming up very soon. But after that, it becomes very hard to know how to steer the ship when you don't have a lot of data. I don't want to overstate the case. We have lots of other numbers that come from the private sector. The Federal Reserve, for instance, puts out data on industrial production. It's separate from the government collection. But our best numbers and the most reliable numbers are completely missing right at the point where we could be at a turning point.
Some of those payroll numbers, however, Justin, from ADP, for example, have really been an indication about the private sector losing jobs, especially small businesses, which is not a good sign for the economy. Talk to me a little bit more about the government shutdown's impact on the Fed's decision to lower rates. We know that the White House has been clamoring for this more and more. You mentioned that it's possible that it still may come down. To what do you think may be the comfort level there? And will that translate into a real stabilization of the economy?
Yeah. So let me just try and simplify the debate a little bit. What's going on is the Fed had interest rates high because after the pandemic, we had inflation. It was trying to beat that inflation down. So interest rates were high, the sort of rates where you would trying to put your foot on the brake. What the Fed's trying to do now is take its foot off the brake. which is to say move interest rates back to normal. And if you knew nothing about the state of the economy, probably the smartest thing to do is just move to normal. Foot not on the brake, not on the accelerator. Let's coast and see what's going on. So I think we're probably still okay moving back to normal. The question is, what do we need to do next? On the one hand, it could be that tariffs are about to blow inflation out of the water. If you look at surveys of businesses, they're worried they're going to have to start raising prices because of tariffs very soon. Consumers expect that to happen soon, and that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If that were to happen, that might lead the Fed to need to raise rates, put its foot on the brake. Or, as you just said, we have some indicators, and I don't think these indicators are quite as reliable as government data. I wish we had the government data. But those indicators do suggest the economy is slowing and slowing sharply. And remember, there's another massive shock going on in the background, which is a huge decrease in immigration, which has historically been one of the sources of demand for American products. And so it could be that we're actually on the cusp of a recession. That's what I mean when I say we could be at a turning point right now. That should lead us to look to the Fed to save us. But if the Fed doesn't have enough data to know that we need saving, it's not going to be able to do that.
This is proof that if you want to understand something that seemed like Greek to you, find an economist, because this is, if I can understand it, anybody can. Thank you, Justin Wolfers, for making this plain for us as part of this conversation.